from the oldest city in the USA, St. Augustine tonight, with our guest, Dorothy Israel, Stephan Fredericks, Bergman, musical guest Joe Pollock, and our guest host for tonight, Lee Weaver. And now, from the oldest city in the USA, the guest host of the St. Augustine Tonight Show, Lee Weaver.
Hello, everybody. Halo. Halo is the shampoo that glorifies your hair. Halo, halo. Before I go any further, I want to offer some thanks to several people. First of all, to Jorge Rivera, hold your applause, the man who has done more for the arts and artists in St. Augustine than anybody ever in all of history. Jorge Rivera. And I want to thank, of course, the Corazon Theater for letting us put this show on. And I want to thank Shirley for Shirley's flowers. Aren't they magnificent right there? Every week, my wife tries to get them and put them in the car, but she's unable to do that. And I want to thank Theo Garrett. If you haven't been to his new shop, it's called Uncommon Theo on West King, for our set up here, the furniture and so forth. And I want to thank also, who else do I need to thank here? I want to thank, maybe that's it. Anyway, my wife, Nanette, yes, I'll thank her. I'm thanking you in advance. This is wonderful, a full house, SRO. You know what SRO stands for? You think you do, and I'm sure you do, but there's lots of things that are called SRO. This is true, you can look it up on the Google. You can look up SRO at the San Diego Zoo, and it will tell you about, they had a program where they were trying to increase the monkey, gorilla, orangutan population because it was going down, and they couldn't get one big old tired orangutan to cooperate, and he was classified as an SRO, a sexually reluctant orangutan. But SRO is what we've got here tonight, and the first time I ever had a standing room only audience was, gosh, it was 40 years ago, I guess, and some of you know that I'm an actor, and I was called upon to do my program about Judas Iscariot during Easter season at the New Brunswick Theological Seminary. And so I showed up there just in time to get inside. I had a costume in my duffel bag, and I pulled into the parking lot and I opened the door so that I wouldn't be seen changing, and I took off my coat and tie and my top coat, and I put on the dress, and I had my 30 pieces of silver and a change purse and my sandals and so forth. I'm talking fast because Jorge said I've got to do it in 10 minutes. And I went running up to the auditorium. It wasn't an auditorium, it was a room, and my host greeted me, Lee, we've got a problem. Somebody took all the chairs out of the room we've been assigned. I said, oh, really? And he said, is that all right with you? And that's the first time I had a standing room only for that. And I did. And it went fine, and I couldn't stay for refreshments. I went running back to the parking lot because I had another gig down in East Barnstable, which is down near Princeton and down in that neck of the woods. And I quick outside again, changed into my street clothes, and got in the car and click, 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 click. Oh, no. That means the car is dead. What am I going to do? I don't know cars. I don't know what to do. And I got out of the car, and you know what? You kick a tire. I don't know what that's about, but I didn't know what to do. And another fella came out, and I said, Bob, are you going north or south? I got to be in East Barnstable in about 25 minutes. He said, no, I'm going north, and I'm late, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, what are you doing? I said, they're making a TV, a PBS thing. Oh, I don't know what. He said, well, take the train. I said, I don't do trains. I don't. My wife does trains. She was born in the Bronx and raised in Queens, and when we're in New York, She takes care of the trains. We even went to Paris. She'd never been there before, but she knows how to do the trains, but I don't. And so I said, well, he said, get in the car. We're only 2 blocks from the train station. And so I got in the car and I said, well, what do I do? I had my duffel bag and my briefcase. And he said, well, you just get on the train and you tell them well, don't I need a ticket? Yes, I'll point out the ticket window. You go up, you buy a ticket, you tell them where you want to go. They'll sell you a ticket. And then you go get on the train. And when the, what's the guy who's, yes, I don't know much about train travel. I'm telling you. When the conductor comes down, he'll see you, and if you don't have a ticket for him, he'll say, where are you going? You tell him East Barnstable, and you're all set like that. So we pulled into the parking lot, and there was a train right up there next to the boardwalk, platform, that's right, the platform. And so we pulled up and he said, no, that's your train right there. Just go get right on it. But I got to have a ticket, I said. And he said, no, you don't need a ticket. You told me I needed to buy a ticket. He said, no, just get on the train. And when the conductor, I got it, when he comes down the aisle, he'll say, where are you going? You tell him East Barnstable. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I ran up there, got on the train, I sat down, and sure enough, the baton guy, the conductor, he approached me. The train was underway, and he says, where are you going? I said, East Barnstable. And he said, well, this train doesn't stop in East Barnstable. And I said, what do you mean it doesn't stop? I'm told it goes right through it. It stops there. He said, no, that's the local. This is the express. We're not stopping until we get to Trenton. But I've got to get off. I got to get off the train in East Barnstable. And he said, well, I'm sorry, it doesn't stop in East Barnstable. Oh, what am I going to do? And I sat down. I said, would you go up and talk to the, what do you call that guy? No, not the conductor. He's the one with the tickets, the guy that drives the train. He doesn't drive, the engineer, thank you, whoever said that. And so I said to the conductor, go up to the engineer and tell him there's a guy who's got to get off the train in East Barnstable. He said, it won't do any good. I said, why not? He said, because this train doesn't stop in East Barnstable. I said, ask him anyway. He said, all right, I'll ask. He came back in about 90 seconds. It wasn't far. And I said, what did he say? What did he say? And he said, to tell you, this train doesn't stop in East Barnstable. So then, and I hate to let this cat out of the bag. Some of you don't know it, but I'm a clergyman, or I used to be. Anyway, so I pulled out what I now call my God card. That, it was a business card with the Holy Reverend Devout Doctor something or other. And I give him my card and tell him this is very, very important. He said, it won't do any good. I said, give it to him. He said, all right. He went. He came back. I said, what did he say? What did he say? He said, to tell you, this train doesn't stop in East Barnstable. But the engineer said, he'll slow down a bit. What do you mean he'll slow down? He said, yeah, when we get into East Barnstable, he'll slow down. And then what am I supposed to do? He said, you hop off the train. I said, well, how much is he going to slow? Well, enough that I don't know. He said, what do you got to be there for? And I told him, it's important. He said, well, you look fit. This was 40 years ago. And in my duffel bag, I was a racquetball champion. I had all of my gear in there. And so I took off my wingtips and I put on my sneakers. And he said, come on with me. And he took me out there to stand between 2 cars on the whatever it is, And I said, now what do I do? And he said, well, when we get near the platform, you're going to jump. But he said, you got to be careful. Make sure that when you jump, you keep your legs going, Don't just jump or you're going to go right on, And he said, just keep running right in the air so when you leap and land, you'll be all right. I said, okay, how do I know when to jump? He said, I'll clap you on the shoulder like you're jumping out of a plane, And we pulled in there, and the train did slow down some. And he clapped me on my shoulder, and I jumped, and I was magnificent. I was in the air, maintaining my balance, running. I landed perfectly. I was sprinting down the platform. I was going so fast, I was starting to pass the car off of which I just jumped. And I was gaining on the next car, and there was a fella down there saying, come on there, fella, you're going to make it. And as I got up near to him, sprinting, he reached down and got me by the shoulders, and he pulled me up onto the platform. He said, you're one lucky young fella. this train doesn't stop in East Barnstable. Thank you. That's the fastest I've ever told that story. We are so glad that you're all here. We're grateful to you and to everybody else, and we are right now going to have our first music from our guest musician this night, Joe Pollock, and he's going to take the stage right now. Won't you greet Joe Pollock, please?
At St. Augustine Distillery, we're part of a new generation of American craft distillers. Family owned and operated, we are committed to making the best possible spirits using local agriculture. Our distillers make everything by hand, from mashing and blending to distilling and tasting each and every batch. We distill and bottle everything we sell, making sure that the spirits are just right before barreling and aging. Bottled by real people, we love showing our guests not only what we do, but why we do it. We're passionate about educating our guests to not only what goes into each bottle, but how to make the best possible cocktails. We love St. Augustine, and thanks to your purchases, we're able to give back to the community and help local organizations each and every day.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
St. Augustine Distillery, handmade with pride in the nation's oldest city.
Welcome back, everyone. This is a very exciting time for me. The first person that I'm interviewing tonight is known to everybody in St. Augustine and in St. Johns County. I'm just going to say two things before I say her name aloud, which will be your signal. She was celebrated at the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center last year as one of the living legends in our community. And, yes, that's fine. And the St. Augustine record, the St. Augustine, that's a joke. The St. Augustine record had a special edition recognizing her as one of the 10 most active, influential, wonderful people in our community. Yeah. And now I want you to do it. It's Dr. Dorothy Headley Israel, known to us all as Deeh Israel. Welcome, Deeh. I scarce know where to begin, and we could fill the whole hour here, but we're on a clock, and so I'm going to try to move us along. I think, first of all, we just need to know a little basic information. Deeh, where were you born? And tell us when you were born, all right? I'll tell you, we celebrated her 95th birthday just a few weeks ago. Yes. Where do you hail from, Deeh?
Well, I hail from Harlem during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, and it was a beautiful time to be alive, but it also had its problems. So I consider my life filled with joy and also pain. The joy was that as youth, we could go to, the Cotton Club was closed, so we could go to the Savoy and dance the night away on weekends. But the most important thing at that time was the Renaissance, where blacks who became icons, artists who became icons later on, got their start in Harlem. And one of them that I knew going to the grocery store, he lived near me, was Langston Hughes.
Oh, my.
And once I said to him in the store, I said, why did you write such a stupid book? Simple speaks his mind. So he read back and said, you'll understand one day. See, I took it literally at the time rather than the story of a working class guy who really was struggling with the whole sense of discrimination. And I learned that much later. So it was a great time dancing to Duke Ellington and Count Basie and going to the Apollo and hearing Amateur Night and the winners such as Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. So it was and we would run after the show to see them come out and say hi. So it was great. Now, the pain was the fact I was dark-skinned, and being dark-skinned with braided hair was a mark of inferiority. So in school, I was called the black doll, or not doll, but black, and why don't I go back to Africa? Because my parents came from the Caribbean, so I understand the plight of immigrants today. And because of that, they said, why don't you go back, you monkey chaser, and you look terrible. And it was said by light-skinned blacks who identified with whites at that time, as well as white students. So it wasn't pleasant, But I was able to get out of that when I went to New York University. And that was a beautiful experience there because it opened my mind to other people and how they lived. And especially, I had the experience with Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. She was invited to Harlem to come and speak to the community about some of the problems they were having. And I was on the welcoming committee because I was doing work at the Harlem Boys Club under George Gregory. So she came, and it was a lot of kids. It was a recreation center and activity center. And the kids were all dressed, knew she was coming, they wore their little starched blouses and skirts. There was no pants in those days. And she came in that room and greeted the kids warmly, asked them about themselves. She really was a trooper in terms of showing warmth, understanding, and acceptance that I never forgot. She was really a great lady, as we later found out. But it was a nice experience, and she asked me about myself and what I had planned to do.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, I wanted to be a chemist because I was good in chemistry and math. But I later turned to sociology. So from there, after I graduated from NYU, I went on to Atlanta, to the School of Social Work. My parents were divided as to whether I should go south, because they, protective of their only child. But anyway, my mother I had an uncle who settled in the South because he went to Meharry. He couldn't get into med schools up north, so he went to Meharry Medical School and settled in the South. So he felt, let her come, it's all right. So I went south. So on the train, when you change from New York to Washington, D.C., you get into a southern train. And I'll never forget, the waiter, the porter came and said, well, it's dinner time, rang the bell, dinner time for Pullman people. So I went into the dining room, and beautiful dining room with white tablecloths and stemware glasses and so forth. And the waiter brought me the menu, and then he left, and he pulled his curtain. And I can hear that switch that he pulled the curtain to separate me from the white people who were dining, So that was my first open sense of prejudice at that time. It was prejudice in New York, but it wasn't that obvious in terms of that. Because in Harlem, when I grew up, even in the department stores, you couldn't try on clothes. And in the neighborhood, blacks didn't own anything, So anyway, I got to Atlanta, and that proved to open another new world for me. It was a college town, and blacks, for the first time I saw, owned their own homes, because we lived in an apartment house. They owned their own homes, and I met 4 students who we became lifelong friends, and we still talk together. Mm-hmm. 2 of them have passed, but the 3 of us, we used to meet every year and go places together. So that was a great experience. So from there, I had an internship in Detroit, and I said, oh, this is great. The further north you go, the less prejudice you'll have. So I got to Detroit in 1949, and the first morning, the Saturday morning, I went for breakfast in this restaurant, not like a diner. And I sat at the counter, and I ordered, I like to eat. I ordered toasted corn muffin, scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, and I just was ready for it. And I was reading, and I noticed, people came in and out, and I said, well, what happened? Well, what happened was I eventually said, where's my breakfast? He said, we don't serve your kind. So that was my first experience with Detroit. So
let me interrupt. Where did you, I know you got your PhD in Atlanta. You were in grad school. Is that for a master's?
That was for a master's in social work.
And then where did you get your PhD?
I got it, it was originally called University Without Walls, but now it's called the Union Institute and University.
And you now have standing as, is this correct, Professor Emerita at what school?
At Stony Brook.
At Stony Brook.
I was there for 25 years at Stony
Wow,
Brook.
wow, this is... This is the easiest interview ever done, let me tell you. I want to get you to Florida. We could listen to Deeh for an hour, I'm sure, but you came to Florida, I know, just 25 years ago. Can you tell me how that came about?
Well, my second husband was from Florida, from St. Augustine.
Yes.
So we came here to retire. So when we got here, he'd talk a little about St. Augustine, but I hadn't paid any attention. But anyway, we got here, and he introduced me to his friends, Jamie Price and Barbara Vickers and others. And we sit around the dinner table and they talk about all the wonderful experiences they had growing up. And I said, what are they talking about? I don't even see blacks on the street, you know. So this continued, and I said to a friend, Clarence Williams, I said, we ought to write about this because people don't know. Because I was in a writing group in Palm Coast, and I would tell them about this, and they looked at me, white folks looked at me like I was crazy. Because some of them were from St. Augustine, but they were on a different path, you know, different part of town, and with Jim Crow, never the twain should meet. Yes. So they didn't know. So I did a pamphlet, and I brought some of them if some are interested to see it, on some of the history of blacks, and Henry Hurd helped me with the graphics and whatnot. So that was a big hit in people knowing about St. Augustine.
If we get Deeh back here another time, I'm going to ask her then. We don't have the time right now. She was at Washington, D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial, were you not?
Yeah.
For King's I Have a Dream speech?
Yeah.
We want to hear about that, but I've got to move us here into St. Augustine quickly. There are 3 organizations that Deeh has had a profound effect on in their beginning and their continuing process. Would you tell us about Fort Mose, Deeh?
Well, Fort Mose, most of you may know this, is the oldest black settlement in the United States. We're trying to get the word out to people, the untold story. But it's a beautiful story of diversity, faith, love, and determination, because it was the Governor Montiano who needed more recruits for battling the division between the British and the Spanish here. You know, it's always territorial stuff like's going on today. He needed more recruits, so he petitioned to let people know in South Carolina and in Georgia who were enslaved there, they would get their freedom if they could get to St. Augustine. And you know, anytime people want freedom, you see it today, they will do anything for freedom.
And now, Fort Mose is a place that's thriving, I would say, and largely due to Deeh Israel's efforts. Tell us about the Wildflower Clinic and what you had to do with that.
Well, it's very interesting. I belonged to a little group with St. Cyprian's Episcopal Church and Trinity Episcopal Church. And we got together and felt there was something needed in the community, and we decided on health. So I had heard there were neighborhood clinics. I went to Jacksonville and saw these neighborhood clinics under the Good Samaritan, and I said, well, we ought to have one here. And also the First Methodist Church on King Street, Dr. Sharpton was also interested. We got the Department of Health interested, and our pastor, Pastor Dina, we got interested, and we developed the first neighborhood clinic in St. Augustine.
Through Deeh Israel's efforts. Now, I have to move us along, and I've saved my favorite to the last. You are a trustee right now on the board of directors of the Lincolnville Museum and Center for Culture, Lincolnville Museum Cultural Center, Museum and Cultural Center. There we go.
That's right.
And would you tell us just a little bit about that, please?
Well, it's housed in the Excelsior School, but I want to give a shout out a little for, there are 2 museums in St. Augustine.
Yes.
One is the Accord,
yes,
that does a great job on civil rights, the history and so forth. But the Lincolnville gives the whole African diaspora, starting with the Moors who settled in Spain and brought fruit that we eat today, and saffron and rice and so forth. It wasn't Spain, it was the Moors who did that, coming there and stayed there for 500 years. And we know them from Othello, we know something about that. But anyway, the museum starts with that and has a wonderful timeline as you come in that Sue Aggressor did. And you really see the whole story of our experience from then to now. and we have speakers who come in. We have jazz concerts. So get involved. We need volunteers. It'd be nice to get involved in.
And we could, but we can't. Deeh Israel, everyone. Thank you. Here, this is for you. You can take that with you. Hold that right up to the camera right there.
Yeah, I can't see
Here,
it.
just hold that up. There we go. So I'm doing this little play right here on this stage, and this man whom I've never met, but I've seen in many places, comes up to me after the play and he says, I want to come back tomorrow. Would you let me come and play my cello as a prelude for your show? And I said, yes. And that's how I met the Cello Man, Stephan the Cello Man. And I thank you for that. And here we are. My gosh, it's easy to begin just the same way we do all these. Tell me, where are you from, Stephan? Where did you go to school? Where were you born? All that.
I'm from New York.
All right. I want to ask a question. We all know you as the Cello Man, and we'll hear more about that. But I didn't ask you when we talked. Did you start on the cello, or did you start?
Well,
on the
not to
fiddle?
defame Joe, I think it is. I wanted to play the guitar like Les Paul as a little child, and I said to my mother that she'd always say at summertime, "Do you want to learn an instrument?" I said, "Yeah, I'll play the guitar." So she took me by hand to this little man. He was little then too. To learn how to play the guitar. I was like 11 and a half years old, and I knocked on his door, and I was much bigger than he was at 11 and a half, and I said, I want to play the guitar, and he said, oh. So he looked at me, and he realized I was tall, and then he said, let me see your hands, and other than basketball, cello playing could be good, and he said, turn around. And I said, can you hear the notes? He said, oh my God. He looked at my mother and said, excuse me, please. Anybody could play the guitar. You should play the cello. And I said, what is
Joe
it?
Pollock.
What is it? Exactly. What I thought he said Jello, honestly. And I'm happy to say there's always room for Jello. So the cellos work for me. So I went home. I had two older brothers, twin brothers, and they were all American football players. My father was into sporting goods, and I came there, and I was totally attacked by my brothers. They're sissy kid brothers with this cello, and my mother kept saying, Maury Amsterdam played the cello, which some people remembered, so I was okay. And being a child who was thrown into this without musical families or art, my mother would stay up at night and transpose songs like Oh My Papa, whatever it is, from the note for cello playing, because she knew after a week of scales I would have quit. Yeah. So I had that kind of combined music making right away. And I told my mother I didn't want to be a cello player, I wanted to be a cellist.
Okay, all right. Now,
Yes.
You were a child prodigy.
Yes.
Yes, you were. Now, I happen to know that you played at the UN with Pablo Casals. How old were you, and how did that happen?
I was 13, maybe 14. How it happened, I told my mother I want to be a cellist. So living in New York, she dragged me to Carnegie Hall every weekend. If anybody has known, Carnegie Hall used to have luthiers, which are violin makers, with vaults. It was very impressive. And I'd walk in there, be people like Ishtak Pearl and this one, that, and she'd say, stop playing, stop playing, stop playing. So the quest was I good enough to be a cellist, because I didn't want to be a cello player. So, so she would find out so-and-so is coming. It would have been like Yo-Yo Ma's coming to New York. And she'd connect with him, I don't know how, and I'd be at the Plaza Hotel at 13, 14, playing on $6 million cellos. And so does he have it? Of course, and my mother was very New Yorky. So does he have it or not? And it was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So Pablo Casals, I think most of you probably have heard the name, one of the greatest musicians and an amazing person. He exiled himself from Spain with Salvador Dali and Picasso, never to go to Spain. He went to Puerto Rico, and he came to the UN and also the White House and played the cello, the Song of the Birds, my mother knew he was coming there. So she sent 24 roses to Maria Casals, who was 26 and Pablo was 82, but it was one of her students. And we came to the UN, and of course that was enough seeing the flags. And basically, Casals played this piece with his moaning, and he got all done, and it was time to go backstage. So my mother's dragging me, because I'm tall, but I'm young, and I'm the lady with the roses. So in we went, and Maria Casals thanked my mother, tremendously, because they were very beautiful. And there's Don Pablo, who once more was little. So I'm thinking maybe if I was smaller, I'd really be good. So he was standing there and does not speak English, by the way. And his energy was amazing, just like, got me. And somebody started talking, and do you play? Oh, I play the cello. They pushed me next to Pablo Casals, and it's press, pick, picture, and he's holding my hand, and I'm having a rush. Not being a musician, you just feel this man's brilliance, and they start taking pictures and making a film of Pablo Casals going. So this is quite an amazing electric experience.
So this goes on during these formative years for you.
Totally.
And then you put it away for 30, 40 years,
Yes.
and it's not a happy story.
No.
But can you share it for us?
Yes. I was the first cellist for the High School of Performing Arts, and I there played at the Carnegie Recital Hall, the City Center, as a cellist, by the way. And and I was at school, and one day at the high school, the principal sent a note, said I had to go home. And take a cab. And I took a cab, I walked up the stairs. I had two brothers, as I say, and one of them I adored with my heart and soul. He was my mentor or whatever. I had found that he was just killed on an airplane. And ironically, which is kind of the kiss of the story, he was such a beautiful person. There was a crack in the windshield. They took everybody off the plane. They put him on two different planes because they going to Miami. And he sat in, I think her name was Mrs. Zevon, the 85-year-old woman. He let her go first. So he sat in her chair. Consequently, some lunatic put a bomb on the plane with him to collect insurance. And my brother consequently vanished. I had realized, I came home, and everybody, of course, it was not a happy moment. And I was at that time 16, I believe, maybe 17. And I suddenly was taken back that I can't sit in this chair for 4 to 6 hours every day when I saw life ending so quickly. So I said thank you to the cello. Nobody cared about my journey because they all had their own grief. And the cello said goodbye. By the way, all the trips to Carnegie Hall, my parents bought me a cello made in 1685. So that's I'm now Chinese, by the way. So basically, I put down the cello, and I did play the violin a little bit. I was blessed by living with Timothy Leary and Bambaram Das in Millbrook, so anybody played music there. So I kind of played a little bit then, and I just put it away, but I knew God gave me this gift, this genius gift. Well, genius feels so egotistical. This gift, and I transcended it into becoming a photographer in New York, Miami, and all around fashion. And I worked for Decca Records, MCA. I did Elton John's album, Dave Rubin. So I was back with music, and I remember my mother saying, kind of, someday you'll regret this. So I only regretted it when a guy named Yo-Yo Ma showed up, and I knew I could have been on Sesame Street playing the cello. So basically...
how many years were you off the cello?
40-something years.
40-something years. And you're what? You're about 52 now.
That's right.
So you take it up. How many years ago did you...
Well, I'm a Renaissance man, which I'm boasting about. I carve wood, stone, glass, and I make things. And
he's a sculptor.
Yes, well...
A dimensional artist.
Yes, and a lot of it's commercial because I know photography, advertising, so... I was in my studio and I heard this music. I was like, oh God, and it was Yo-Yo Ma, that guy, who I hated, of course, because he was going all around the world and I'm still here. And he was playing this piece of music and my heart just went boom, 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 boom. I ran into my house. By the way, I have a farm also in Cedar Key. You all know where that is on the West Coast. It's about this big. And my dial-up, I went and found a cello. I needed a cello. It was like a fix. I needed to touch a cello.
How many years ago?
This would be 6 years, 7 years ago, maybe. And
After a 40-year.
yeah. So I found the cello for $125 in Jacksonville and drove all the way up. And it was like, I guess, a prisoner after getting out for 50 years and he was going to be with his girlfriend. I wanted to get home and play that. I drove very quickly. But I played and it didn't work. It was like, this isn't working, but it should work. Well, it wound up that it was a small cello. And I didn't know they made them different size because when I was young, it was too bad. So after a while, what I did was, Yo-Yo Ma, I bought that album, and I sat all night, listened all night long until I was able to play the entire album with them by ear. And I said, this is working. So I wound up playing in Gainesville at a lot of the community center, blah, blah, playing with people, which was nice. And living at the farm, I need a better life. I sold part of my farm, and I bought a trawler in downtown St. Augustine. It was there or Prague, but somebody said to me, you know what? Everybody from Prague came here. So St. Augustine was a place. It was I would play 4, 5, 6 places a night, just walking around, and that's where a lot of people have seen me. And I play with anybody.
We're going to hear a little bit of Stephan's artistry in just a moment, but anything coming up in the next little while that?
Well, I'm blessed to play once more at one of Lee's thing. I have a bunch
That's
of.
Saturday, February 22nd, by the way, right here.
I play at this point basically a lot of private engagements, parties, and things like this, which I have, and also Philip Anthony's Signature Gallery. I think in early week of March, I'm playing with. Will be part of this Russian artist that's coming there. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, Stephan, and forgive me for not remembering it, reclassified, reconstructed,
reclaimed
music.
like a
is
laundry
what he
ticket.
does. So Stephan is going to play us off here for just a couple of minutes. I know we've got a.
By the way, I have several cellos, not like 1600. And by the way, if you would like to know, I was not to guess, I was a hippie.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes, surprise. I was a hippie, and I had lived outside of New York being a photographer, and I had a gallery studio. And I sold everything I could to have a new life. And under the influence, an elderly couple came up to my garage sale, and she said she played the cello. And I said, really? So I gave them that cello. My parents had stored it for 20, 30 years in a case and never, so this was in pieces. And I could never have afforded to have fixed it.
All right.
Is it?
You got 2 minutes.
I'm from New York, but I love St. Augustine.
Stephan's inspiration and muse is Lori. I can't see where you are,
Show
but here's to you too. Thank you, Stephan the Cello Man.
Thank you.
At St. Augustine Distillery, we're part of a new generation of American craft distillers. Family owned and operated, we are committed to making the best possible spirits using local agriculture. Our distillers make everything by hand, from mashing and blending to distilling and tasting each and every batch. We distill and bottle everything we sell, making sure that the spirits are just right before barreling and aging. Bottled by real people, we love showing our guests not only what we do, but why we do it. We're passionate about educating our guests to not only what goes into each bottle, but how to make the best possible cocktails. We love St. Augustine, and thanks to your purchases, we're able to give back to the community and help local organizations each and every day.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
St. Augustine Distillery, handmade with pride in the nation's oldest city.
With Joe Pollock.
Yeah, I brought it from home.
Oh, you got it there. Yeah, just
hiding.
a couple of quick questions. Who are you playing next? Where can we see you live again?
I'll be at Stogie's tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, 9 till 1 on Charlotte Street.
Yes, and if we want to hear your music but not in person, can we buy it or listen to it or
You
tune it in?
can buy it, you can listen to it, you can pirate it if you want. It's on Apple Music, it's on Spotify, I'm on YouTube, Amazon, I'm on JB Hi-Fi if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So.
All right, thank you so much. Joe Pollock.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a few minutes, all right?
Martinez and Associates, we can help you with many things. Number one is income for life throughout your retirement, which is very important. Number two would be Medicare choices, which are very confusing. Number three is a legacy for your loved ones. And finally, keeping you independent throughout retirement. My name is Tuli Martinez. Call this number. Y hablamos español.
It is a special treat for me tonight to introduce to you our next guest. He's a friend of mine, a personal friend. We've only known each other a half a year, but we're next door neighbors, and so we've packed in those few months several years worth of conversations. You may have seen him on TV give a TED Talk, and he is going to tell a story right now. Won't you welcome, please, Corey Bergman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's say one more word. Corey is the CEO and founder of Ukuleles for Kids, Inc. And it's such a wonderful story, and this is going to be another easy interview. I'm just going to let you take it away. But first, tell us, Corey, where are you from? Where'd you go to school?
New York City, New York.
All right.
Is anybody else from New York? I love it here.
Yeah. So whereabouts in New York?
Well, anywhere from Manhattan to Long Island, back to Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Hofstra University.
Yeah.
In Long Island.
Yeah, Hofstra. And the story of this Ukuleles for
Ukulele Kids Club.
Ukulele Kids
Come
Club.
on, Lee.
Inc. Don't forget Inc.
That's right.
It has an interesting and a difficult beginning, but I'm not going to try to characterize it. Tell us what you can, Corey.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that last time I did a little interview talk like this was about 4 years ago, so I'm a little rusty about this. And I always seem to follow a phenomenal musician. And it's, yeah, well, when I did the TED Talk, I came on after a concert pianist who like blew the crowd away, and then I come on with my little ukulele. And if you can keep a secret, I really don't play this thing.
He's a guitarist par excellence. He is.
Okay, so let me give you the Reader's Digest version of what happened. So we all have a journey. So 10 years ago, my son Jared went off to Spain on his spring break. He was a junior at University of Rhode Island. And as all of us have had tragedies in our lives, you know, one of the rough things happened. He came home from his trip, and he had contracted a super virus, something very similar to what you're hearing about in China right now is going on. It was unidentifiable, but he came home from his trip. He texted me, because that's what kids do. Dad, I saw everything. It was the best time. And then we got the call the next morning. You know, it's that call that we fear, all of us, from the time our babies are born. You just never want to hear that call. So Jared passed away 10 years ago. He was the best kid ever, just like all your kids. Super athletic, musician, all of it. My wife and I stayed in New York for a couple of years trying to figure out what to do. And we decided to relocate to Florida. We moved to Miami Beach in 2012, right? And so as a guitarist, I wanted to do something. I was working with the Make-A-Wish Foundation for a few years in New York. When I came down, I wanted to go a little closer to some children's hospitals. So I met a friend who introduced me to some people at Miami Children's Hospital, which is now Nicholas Children's Hospital. And I went down there, and they showed me all around the hospital, and they said, we understand you're a guitar player. Would you want to come down and bring your guitar here as a volunteer? And I did the tour. I thought it would be really tough, but I found something very nice about the hospital, and I love kids. And so I brought my guitar down to the hospital. They put me in a family resource center, which is a room identified for kids that can get out of bed, out of the units, come down. There's computers, movies, video games, and the parents hang out. And I brought my guitar in there one day, and I started doing a little jazzy stuff, and I noticed that from dead silence, people started to come around and listen to the music, and they started doing a little dancing. I was just doing this little Latin kind of thing. And so I did that for about a year at Miami Children's Hospital. Came in a few times a week, and then I moved over to a hospital closer to our home in Fort Lauderdale. And I had a very unique experience there, because in that second hospital, there was no board-certified music therapist. Now, I don't know if you guys know about the field of music therapy, but it's, and I learned about it really at that time. In any case, I went to that hospital, but this hospital allowed me to go onto the floor, onto the units where the kids are, and that's kind of very progressive, because you have to jump through hoops to get into a pediatric hospital with all kinds of HIPAA regulations and stuff like that. But anyway, they send me up there the first time, and I'm wearing my big guitar, and I get up on the 4th floor oncology. And you guys, I know if you've not been in there, don't go. And if you have been in there, you know what I'm talking about. I go down around the floor, and it's silence just like this. That's the sound that I heard. So I started playing on my guitar a little softly. It was very healing for myself to play the music, be around the kids, and go around. And the turning moment was I came into a room, the door opens up, and the mother, her name was Joy, she came out and she said, "Corey, my son is a guitarist. He's over there in bed. Would you mind coming in and talking to him, meeting him?" So I went in and I met Jason. He was lying in bed, very lethargic, kind of sleeping, hooked up to his various medications and tubes, and he started to perk up, and I said, "Jason, I understand you're a guitar player." And he goes, "Yeah." And then she showed me some pictures of him in rock bands, and he's pretty sick. He was lying there. So I said, "Tell you what, I'm going to give you my guitar. Let me see what you got. Let me see you play it." So I'm holding a guitar like Joe's over there. And I stood up, and I took the guitar off my shoulders, and I put it in his hands in bed. And he was really excited. And as he took his arms around to hold the instrument, he winced, because his veins were all hooked up. He couldn't do anything. So I thought I was doing something good, but it was very painful. So I came back with one of these. You guys all know what a ukulele is, right? Yeah. So I gave Jason the ukulele. He was diddling around with it. He was laughing and having fun. And so what we did was I continued to do this. And my wife and I went out and we bought about 10 or 12 ukuleles from some local business stores. And as I was going around the next few months, I started to give them out to kids who were interested in music. Some of them, were wanted to watch video games or read, but a lot of kids were interested in music. And the thing about a ukulele is because of the size and so easy to play, it's tuned so that one finger on one fret on one string is a C chord. So you can teach a kid in 2 seconds how to make some music, and that makes a big difference. So Ed and I bought these ukuleles, and over the next couple of weeks, we handed out about a dozen ukuleles. And sometimes the kids would bring them back to the hospital when they had repetitive treatments. And so the story goes like this. Am I cool?
You're good. You're good.
So we go out to dinner with some friends, and they asked us how we're doing, what are we up to. We tell them we're buying some ukuleles for some kids in hospitals and giving them out. It's making a big difference. So a couple of my friends said, "How much are these ukuleles? What do they cost?" So I said $20. It was a little more than that, but I just thought it was a nice, round, easy number. So 2 of them right away, they took out a couple of $20 bills and gave it to me. And then a couple of more people gave us $20 bills. And then a few more friends gave it $20 bills. And then my friend called and said, "I'll take 5. And another guy said, "I'll take 10. And so in a couple of weeks, we had a stack of $20 bills. It wasn't like $1 million, but I could see whoever I told the story to loved it and gave us some money.
Yeah. And so that was the beginning.
That was the beginning.
All right. Now,
that was the beginning.
Now, I want. How many have been distributed worldwide? If you read the caption there, you see it's not just U.S. but internationally. How many ukuleles has the club distributed to date?
As of today, 8,300.
Tell the folks about the over 100 volunteers, right?
Oh, I mean, it's a global sensation. It's all volunteers, the organization. We have really 5 staff people who are part-time, and it's just, it's a joy, and we're working directly with music therapists now. So that when we make these donations, they go into the hands of a board-certified therapist who uses these ukuleles to identify kids, but they're not music teachers. They use them for different means of exercise and therapeutic reasons. Kids will come out of a surgery and they need to move their arms, and there's just a whole science.
It's a healing.
It's a healing piece, yes.
Music ministry.
Yes.
And these volunteers, well over 100, give the kid the ukulele and then they show him, play that C chord right here with one finger, and they teach them right there on the spot.
They do, but they're board-certified music therapists, so they're actually employed by the hospitals.
Yes.
There's about 250 hospitals now that we partner with, and we repeat the donations as we can on a repetitive basis. They let us know when they need more.
Could you share with us, we've got a few minutes, could you share with us the story you told me about the 6 violins, I think, that were...
Ukuleles, the luthiers.
Or ukuleles, yes. Tell the folks about that.
Yeah, so our organization is all grassroots. We don't have any corporate sponsors or donors yet. We're trying. But I got a call a couple of years ago from somebody that said, we're looking for a nonprofit organization with regard to children's health and instruments, ukuleles. So we got the call, we were interviewed, and it was a really crazy thing, but there are, luthiers are instrument builders. Mm-hmm. You guys know about that. And so 6 world-class luthiers decided as an experiment that they would find a specific piece of wood from a specific tree, and each of them build a ukulele out of the same woods. You can see it on our website. They're called Luthiers for a Cause. And to make a long story short, what happened was, they made this collection. Now these luthiers, their instruments sell for $5,000 to $10,000. They're amazing instruments. And so they put them up for auction. And they were hoping to generate about $25,000 or $30,000 in revenue. And they chose us as their charity. And so somebody bought the entire collection for $100,000. And the funny thing is, so I met him, we go out for an Asian lunch, and he takes out this dirty, crumpled up little old check for $100,000. And then he says, here you go, and what can I say? That guy is now chairman of our board of directors, because, that's what we do. So, thank you. So let me just say this. We got that. So Ukulele Kids Club, it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Back to the story, my wife said, we're getting a lot of $20 bills, why don't we set this up as a nonprofit organization? Neither of us knew what we were getting into. It just sounded like a good idea. This way people could make donations and actually have tax deductions out of it. So the organization is 6 years old officially now, since we got our IRS registration for nonprofit. We've raised $1 million this year, and it's mostly been on $20 to $50 bills.
Yeah.
And that $100,000 donation.
Wow,
it's really been a grassroots thing.
It's such a remarkable story. Yeah. We're not passing a plate around tonight.
No.
That's not the purpose of this. Yeah. But I say, if you talk to me after, or to Corey, if you want to be a part of this. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing. I can't imagine you go into a hospital room where the little boy or girl has no hair. You understand? With cancer, and just sitting there with nothing, and then all of a sudden she or he is strumming, and you can see the healing begin to take place right with those.
We have a Facebook page, Ukulele Kids Club, of course, and it's loaded with pictures that the kids and the music therapists send in. And the greatest thing about this is it's really a lot of fun. It's a club atmosphere. You see pictures they're just partying and having a good time. If you ask a kid that just had heart surgery and can't move, how you doing today? They all go, good. Great. So you could see the photos and the stories from the music therapist. It's just a fantastic, uplifting situation turned into a great.
Yeah, and
great
if you want
organization.
to watch the TED Talk, although we got it personally right here, check with me and I'll give you the link, and you can watch the TED Talk also. This is Corey Bergman.
Thank you.
The president, the founder. Good.
Thank you.
We'll be back. We'll be back after a few messages right in here. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Thank you. More from Joe Pollock. Joe Pollock. Just a couple of words of thanks, first of all, to Jorge Rivera, not alone for this opportunity tonight, but because he is continuing to do more for the arts and artists in St. Augustine than anybody alive. Thank you. And a special thanks to our three special guests, in addition to Joe Pollock: Deeh Israel, Stephan Fredericks, Stephan the Cello Man, and Corey Bergman, please.
If you haven't discovered this man yet, I pity the fool. So watch his plays. He's amazing, and I thank you for these wonderful people you brought.
Thank you, Jorge. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.